It's time for the Your Personal Bank Show with Ferenc Toth. In an era of chaos, confusion, and craziness, Ferenc is a voice for common sense. As a financial literacy educator, speaker, and entrepreneur, Ferenc cuts through the noise to help us understand how current events affect our money, economy, and our freedom. Now, here's Ferenc Toth.
Welcome to the Your Personal Bank Show. This is Ferenc. If you want to reach me, you can do so at yourpersonalbank.com. Yes, you will reach me. It's yourpersonalbank.com. Today's show is going to be a little bit different. I'm sure you've heard by now, Charlie Kirk was assassinated. Some people think that this was a really big deal. Others do not. And some, even secretly, or not so secretly, are actually happy about it. I tend to fall in the camp that this is a really, really big deal. And I'm going to share some of the reasons why. If I have some time to get to the financial news of the day, I will. But sometimes there are things that are more important than just money. And this is coming from a financial guy. Charlie Kirk was a martyr. He was gunned down in cold blood. He died doing what he was best at, which was debating for freedom for our country, for all of us. He was killed for his ideas, not for any actions that he did, but because someone disagreed with what he thought. Now, how does someone who debates political ideas become an assassin's target? This is supposed to be the United States. We're supposed to have freedom of speech. We're supposed to be able to share what you believe, what you think about culture, political ideas, the government, the important points of our society. That is how our country was built. It was built on argument, persuasion, clash of ideas. The founding fathers argued for months, literally, about things like the Declaration of Independence, the Constitution, and many other laws that were passed during their time frame. You see, iron sharpens iron. And Charlie Kirk often warned about this, that if we stopped talking to each other, bad things would happen. He was asked oftentimes why he did what he did, why he would go to college campuses and debate with those that disagreed with him. And as he pointed out, he didn't want the alternative. He didn't want to see a civil war. He wanted to battle in the arena of debate and ideas. Thought leaders, journalists, are often killed for their ideas in other countries. This is nothing new, but it is new and unusual for the United States. The closest analogy I can think of would be Martin Luther King. Now, some of you may scoff at that. If you do, I think you lack the understanding of the impact that Charlie Kirk had, especially on the younger generation and in conservative circles. Charlie was often attacked for his character, made out to be a whack job. But the reality is, if you actually watch any of Charlie Kirk's videos, his debates that he had with college students and others, you'll find for the most part he was quite a reasonable guy. He had really mainstream ideas for the most part, the ideas that the majority of Americans still hold today. He was thoughtful. He was polite in most cases. Sometimes it got heated, of course, but that's okay. If somebody really came at him, he would give back. There's many examples of him getting attacked relentlessly by somebody right to his face, calling him all kinds of nasty names and character assassinations and everything else you can think of. Yet he would respond with grace, kindness, thoughtfulness, with the hope of, if not convincing that person that was asking the question, at least convincing the folks in the audience, or maybe there would be listening online later, watching this interaction. And the hope was maybe he could change their minds, or at least get them to think a little bit about why they thought what they thought. The radical left demonized him. There's a reason. And that reason was he was a threat to them. And he was a threat because he was effective. This attack wasn't random, and it wasn't about guns. Charlie was killed for his ideas. He often denounced violence. He never tried to shoot anyone, but they shot him. He was a threat to their power because he was so effective. You could see it. Oftentimes, you see a young college student or a young person come up and ask him a question, and if they had even a little bit of open-mindedness, it was amazing how often he would, through logic, reason, debate, asking them questions, how many times they would walk away from it and even sometimes saying, that's a good point. I never thought about it that way. And even some of them even say, you've convinced me. I'm going to change the way I vote. And that's what threatened the radical left, because he was going after their baby, the young people, the younger generation. A decade ago, the idea that college-age voters would vote significantly for a Republican was unthinkable. And Charlie was one of the main reasons, one of the main people why that shifted so much. It's one of the main reasons why Trump won this last election, and the left hated him for that. That's what made him a target. We've learned through this that the enemy is serious. We saw that when they had power, they would do a lot of things that most people disagreed with, and they would take actions and pass laws that would cause us to lose our rights. But we have also now come to realize that if they're not in power, they'll take whatever steps necessary, including killing their enemies, to try to obtain power. See, Charlie was a target because he supported free speech. He was a target because he did it effectively. And now anyone who supports free speech is a target. Charlie's assassination proves they were scared of him. And their message is really, you need to shut up. Now, again, I think the left has underestimated the power of Charlie's message. If you put this in historical context, the church grew through the blood of the martyrs. The Romans tried to defeat Christianity and failed. In fact, it failed so badly it grew and became the official religion of the Roman Empire. See, the message wasn't really about Charlie Kirk. He was an extremely effective communicator, extremely effective debater. He was thoughtful. He was a deep thinker. He had a deep understanding of politics, of his faith. And this is what caused so many people to listen to him, so many people to be influenced by him. Everyone from teenagers all the way up to the President of the United States. Charlie had a rare gift. It was a gift from God. Now, why I'm sharing this is personally, I feel an extreme sadness and a really deep anger. The senselessness of killing a young man at age 31 with a family, 2 young children, his wife, is absolutely hard to fathom. I have prayed for his family and the loved ones around him that knew him so well. I had the pleasure of meeting Charlie Kirk. I had listened to him, his podcasts, on numerous occasions for a number of years prior. I respected his perspective and the way he would approach a topic. And although I'm older than Charlie, I learned a lot from him. He was wise beyond his years. Frankly, one of the most well-read people I've ever known. Charlie was often mocked because he never went to college. Yet he was far wiser than most of the professors with doctorate degrees. He had the experience. He was very well-read. He challenged himself in the marketplace of ideas on a regular basis. That solidified his thoughts, his ability to communicate. Many of his detractors even respected the fact that he would encourage debate with those that disagreed with him. He was famous for making the statement, if you disagree, you go to the front of the line. And you could ask him anything. His His famous title of his tours was Prove Me Wrong. You could ask Charlie anything on any topic, and rarely was anything ever discussed by Charlie where he did not have a deep and abundant understanding. He understood Christianity, politics, culture. He really understood the intention of our founding fathers, what they wanted for our country, not what it's become currently. And as I stated earlier, why did I listen? Frankly, I often learned things from Charlie or gained a deeper understanding of a particular topic from his debates or interactions with people. I'm going to encourage you to stay tuned in the next segment. I want to share a few more things of why the assassination of Charlie Kirk is so important, and no pun intended, a turning point for our country. Ironically, that was the name of his organization. I don't think that was a coincidence. If you want assistance in learning how to navigate this chaotic time from a financial standpoint, how to survive, how to reduce risk, increase liquidity, contact me at yourpersonalbank.com. Stay tuned in the next segment. Again, I'm going to share why I think this is a turning point for our country.
Stay tuned for more common sense from Ference. For more information, contact Ference at 866-268-4422 or yourpersonalbank.com. That's 866-268-4422. Welcome back to the Your Personal Bank Show with Ference Toth. Want more information? Contact Ference at 866-268-4422 or yourpersonalbank.com. That's 866-268-4422. Now back to the show with Ference Toth.
Welcome back to the Your Personal Bank Show. This is Ference. If you want to reach me, you can do so at yourpersonalbank.com. Yes, you will reach me. It's yourpersonalbank.com. Charlie Kirk's assassination has affected me deeply, more so than almost anyone in my lifetime. I haven't had time to fully grasp for the reasons why. My wife even asked me that question, and I'm not even sure why totally I feel the way I do, but I do feel a deep sadness. I feel a strong anger. I know part of it is the senseless killing of a young husband and father is so unfair. I struggle to put words to it. I'm a family man myself, and although my daughters are older, it wasn't that long ago when they were young girls like Charlie's kids are. When I think about those times, and I think if I had lost, or if that had happened to my family, I just can't imagine what his wife is feeling right now. It breaks my heart. I've prayed for Erica and his family. I know Charlie's in a better place. I'm not actually worried about him, but it's the ones that are left behind that have to pick up the pieces. Those kids are young enough. They're like 1 and 3. They're so young they'll never remember their father. I was quite young when I lost my dad. I was only 7 in a drowning accident. And maybe that's part of the reason this is hitting me so hard. It's just occurred to me right now. I do have a few memories of my father, thankfully, because I was old enough to remember, but barely. My younger brother was only 2. He has no memories of our dad. And it's something that bothers him to this day, and I feel for him. Those kids were robbed of their father by an evil person. When it happens to a political person, when Trump was shot, it impacted. It was upsetting to a lot of people, including myself. But to be fair, presidents have assassination attempts, and presidents have been killed in our history before. So I guess, although it was shocking, it wasn't so surprising. Charlie didn't run for office. He wasn't making laws. Yes, he had influence. Yes, he was impacting a generation. And that was the reason why he was killed. But no one deserves to die debating for their ideas. If you don't agree with someone, they have that right. And if you don't agree with them, then brush up your arguments and discuss it with them and maybe help them better understand where you're coming from. You might, even if you do a good enough job, you might convince them of something. Maybe even to change your mind a little bit. But consider this. If you disagree with someone vehemently, by the way, sometimes it can get hot, it can get heated. That's okay. But when it goes down to attacking somebody's character because that you can't win the argument, that's not okay. And if you can't win the argument without attacking someone's character, perhaps maybe you should reconsider your position. Maybe you're the one that's wrong. Those that denigrated Charlie Kirk or attacked him really didn't understand him, or they did so because he was a threat to their power. I've seen a lot of people recently say this is the MLK or JFK of our generation. And for the younger generations in particular, I think that's very true. I don't think the left really understands how impactful Charlie Kirk was with so many people, in particular young people. MLK was an inspiration for the civil rights movement. Charlie Kirk inspired millions of young people to get involved in politics, often for the very first time. My own daughters have become more interested in politics because of watching Charlie Kirk videos on social media. In fact, it's one of the few videos, clips on social media that we don't mind them watching as parents. There's not a lot of good stuff on TikTok. It was refreshing to see that Charlie Kirk was trying to make a difference, a positive difference. He helped a lot of these young people realize they weren't the only one in their school that thought like they did. That not only was it okay to be a conservative or a Christian, you know what? It was actually cool. And this type of thing is powerful for young people. The boomer generation was famous for protesting and sticking it to the man and all that. And the hippies and all that stuff. That was before my time, but they were cool. It was the cool thing to do. Being a conservative today, try being a conservative today in school or college somewhere, in most cases. You're a social outcast. And most young people don't want to be outcasts. They want to fit in. They want to be a part of the cool crowd, the cool kids. You know what I'm saying? And it's really hard to stand up against all that peer pressure. Well, Charlie gave them the ability to say, hey, there's more people like you and I than you realize. There's other people like this. And actually, in a surprisingly short period of time, the conservatives became the majority. And the cool kids in many of these campuses, you can see it. It's amazing. Because it's what they truly believe. Before that, they would just have to either shut up and get along to go along, or if they did stand up, they basically were getting themselves disinvited to all the social events, parties, or anything else they wanted to be a part of. And that's tough. That's tough on a young kid. I believe this younger generation is going to remember this moment like the older generations remembered where they were when JFK was shot. I think it's that big a deal. I think they're going to remember where they were when they learned Charlie Kirk was assassinated for the rest of their lives. Now, I stated earlier, our country, I believe, is at a turning point. This was a political assassination. The violence has to stop. That's the only way forward. Because the other alternative is a really, really dark path. And I don't want to paint a big picture on that, but folks, we've been down that path once before as a country. We had something called a civil war. Hundreds of thousands of people died. You see, we get comfortable because we've lived in a sliver of time throughout human history where peace has actually been the norm, at least in our country, versus violence. That's not true in most of the world, even today. And that's certainly not true throughout most of human history. So we got used to this idea of peace and, it'll never happen here. Guess what? It can. And everyone who supports this or encourages this or sits on the sidelines and just kind of lets it happen contributes to this downfall of our society and our country. Anyone who supports violence needs to be held accountable. And this includes not only the individuals, but organizations that support this. Being associated with censorship or violence needs to become so toxic in our society that you're a pariah. You're ostracized. You're ridiculed. You're laughed at. You're not taken seriously anymore. You're an outcast. That's what needs to happen. That's the way it used to be. Well, it needs to go back to that. And recently, we've even seen former presidents like Obama and Biden and others posted messages that political violence is not acceptable. That's correct. But here's the problem. Are they being genuine? Do they truly believe this? Or are they just doing what they have to do or what they have to say, until all this blows over? So we have to watch what they do. Are they going to go back to the rhetoric that we've seen now for years? Obama was famous for denigrating about half the country for clinging to their guns and their God. I don't think even Obama truly understands how offensive that is and how divisive those kinds of statements are. Hillary Clinton was famous for calling half the country deplorables because they had different ideas and disagreed with her. Again, an extremely offensive statement and divisive. Biden would often talk about ultra MAGA and how they were a threat to democracy. Again, extremely divisive statements. Those are just a few examples. There's many, many others. Like I said, watch what these leaders do. Watch what they say in the coming days and weeks and months. And if they go back to attacking the character instead of the ideas of those that disagree with them, they need to be held accountable. They need to be denounced, ignored, despised, ridiculed, laughed at, ostracized. They need to become a joke, a meme. They need to lose all power and influence. See, this is how we stop it. This is how we stop those that enable this kind of activity, that then encourages the despicable madmen that'll take a rifle and take a life for somebody who's just debating with those that disagree with them. And this is how we move past this and become a better society. Several people have asked me recently, are you still talking about political things? Not as much as I used to, partly because I try to keep a financial focus on the show. And prior to the election of 2024, there were a lot of policies that were affecting our money. Inflation was a perfect example. And even since then, there's been a lot of government policies, whether it's tariffs, trade deals, etc., that affect our economy. So part of it is, yes, it's political or current events with a financial twist. And part of the reason why I've gone that direction more is because I find there's so little information on that. I get this response for so many listeners, and I truly appreciate this, where I had this one guy listener who called me last week. He said, I was sitting in my car, I was waiting for my wife, she was shopping or something, and your show just happened upon the radio on the station I was on. I never heard you before, and I started hearing things I've never heard from another person, and that's why I wanted to reach out to you. I find that truly an honor. I don't have anybody telling me what to say or do. I'm blessed that way. I know that. And I know in the media, there's very few people who have that blessing. I just try to share from my heart, from my experience, and the experience of the people I talk to on a daily basis from coast to coast. I try to add a little bit of common sense to figure things out. And it's shocking how often what I share comes to pass. It's really not that complicated. It just requires a little perspective and a little common sense. I'm going to encourage you to stay tuned in the next segment, because I want to discuss a few political things that I haven't been sharing lately because I've been busy with so many other things. But I think it's time to discuss it now, so stay tuned.
Stay tuned for more common sense from Ference. For more information, contact Ference at 866-268-4422 or yourpersonalbank.com. That's 866-268-4422. Welcome back to the Your Personal Bank Show with Ference Toth. Want more information? Contact parents at 866-268-4422 or yourpersonalbank.com. That's 866-268-4422. Now back to the show with Parents Toth.
Welcome back to the Your Personal Bank Show. If you want to reach me, you can do so at yourpersonalbank.com. Yes, you will reach me. It's yourpersonalbank.com. I'm going to share some things more of a political nature, which I've done in the past quite often, but not so much recently, primarily because there's just been so many other things to talk about, like the tariff policies, trade deals, the S&P 500 hitting all-time highs ever recorded. But I think this is a time to bring up some of those things. And I know some of you aren't going to agree with what I say. In fact, I also know that some of you might even be offended by what I say. And I run that risk knowingly. I'm in a relationship business. People like to work with those that they like and trust. And if you don't like what I have to say, like the fact that you're going to like me is probably pretty low. And I walk away from business. But again, as I stated at the beginning of the show, there are things in this world, in this life, in our society that are more important than money. Life is not all about money. Yes, it's important. It's one of the important aspects. But let's take a perfect example. You take somebody who's worth millions and millions of dollars and they've got health issues. How many of them would give it all up to be healthy again? I think we all understand they would in a heartbeat if they could. So that's just an easy, simple example of why there are many things in this life that are far more important than money. And I want to discuss some of those right now. It's no secret I've been critical of the Democratic Party, particularly in the last few years. And the primary reason is because it's not reasonable anymore. The radical left, for the most part, taking control of the Democratic Party. And I can prove this. Democrats nearly always vote the same in a block. It's rare that you see Democrats not all vote one way or another on just about any item. That tells you that through their actions, although they may just talk and use moderate language, their actions are far more radical. Because unfortunately in the Democratic Party right now, that's where all the energy is. And those that maybe not are truly that radical, that are in the party, are afraid to stand up. They're afraid they're going to get primaried and lose their power, lose their seats. So they're looking out for their best interest and just going along to get along. I hope and pray that due to some of these recent situations, these assassinations or attempts even, that there'll be a group of them finally that'll grow a spine and stand up and say, no, this isn't right. We're Americans too. We don't hate the other side. We may disagree with them, but we don't think they're racist or Nazis or threats to democracy or whatever other thing you want to call them. And let's debate in the arena of ideas. If our ideas are better, fine. Let's challenge them and let the best idea win. Again, that's what our country was built on. So if somebody tries to tell me that, well, I've even had people come to me, hey, would you support this candidate or whatever? And I'll ask you a few questions, do a little due diligence. And I'll say, well, this is a really good guy and this and that. But, I say, what party is he going to go with? And if they say Democrat, I'm like, unfortunately, I can't support that person. Because although they may be a decent person themselves and rather moderate, experience has shown over the last number of years that once they get up to Washington, for example, or many state houses, they just vote the same as all the other radical left people do. Because again, that's where the power and the energy in the Democratic Party is right now. Regardless of what you may think, Charlie Kirk was a hero. The younger generation needed someone to let them know it was okay to be a conservative, okay to love our country, and it was okay to be a Christian, despite everyone around them, their professors or teachers, maybe telling them otherwise. You see, our only hope is to turn to God. What the devil meant for evil, God can turn to good. That's where my hope lies in all of this. There is a lot of anger. I feel it myself. And this action, this assassination, will radicalize some people. Because for every action, there is an opposite reaction. That's basic physics. But violence is not the answer. Justice is. The people that perpetrated this, the shooter And anyone involved or behind them or supporting or encouraging in any way need to be held accountable. They need to pay the price. That's justice. And what they don't realize, I believe, is they really screwed up. Admiral Yamamoto during World War II made a famous statement after attacking the United States at Pearl Harbor. He said, "We have awakened a sleeping giant." And I believe this assassination of Charlie Kirk has awakened a sleeping giant. See, it's hard to radicalize conservatives because most of us are pretty normal people, whether you believe that or not. Pretty mainstream, focused on raising our families, building our businesses, our careers, being good citizens. Many are Christians. We just want a good society, safe for everyone, opportunity for everyone. But occasionally an event occurs, like Pearl Harbor, like Remember the Alamo, like the assassination of JFK or MLK, like 9/11, that rises up a righteous anger in good people, good-hearted people. They're not perfect, but they're trying their best to do it the right way. And there's nothing wrong with anger. I hear this all the time too. Well, Jesus was love. Yes, that is true. He was love. But he also had something called righteous anger. And if you read the Bible, there's many occasions in there where it points out that Jesus responded in anger. He also famously took a whip at the temple and chased off the money changers. And he was angry, righteously. Anger is not a bad emotion if for the right reasons. Anger is an active emotion, and it can become fuel for action. But I believe this assassination of Charlie Kirk has raised a righteous anger in enough people, and he's a martyr. Martyrs tend to gain more power after they've been killed than before. Charlie had plenty of influence before. I believe there's going to be an army of people that are going to stand up and say no more. I'm not going to just watch and stand by the sidelines. So what is your role in this? If you attack someone's character because you disagree with their ideas, you're part of the problem, not the solution. Calling someone a racist, a Nazi, a threat to democracy, or any other disparaging remark is disgusting. If you witness someone attacking another's character instead of their ideas and do nothing, you are contributing to the problem, not the solution. If you watch or listen to commentary that attacks people's character rather than their ideas, you're part of the problem, not the solution. If you like or post content that disparages other people's character rather than their ideas, you are part of the problem, not the solution. And if you don't agree with that, I suggest you take a hard look in the mirror and really think about it deeply. How is attacking somebody's character just because they disagree with you, how is that a positive thing? How is that making this society and this world a better place? It may make you feel better for a little while, but frankly, it's quite intellectually immature. That's what grade school kids do when they pick on somebody who's different. You're as immature as a grade schooler. And I'm sorry if you don't like this. It's disgusting. It's juvenile, immature behavior. I would say to you, grow up. Get some maturity. Learn, research, ask questions, test your ideas. Test the things that you think are true. Are they? What evidence do you have to back it up? That's a scientific method, by the way. You say you believe in science? Apply the scientific method. You see, if you do those things, or you listen to other people who do those things, or you listen to commentary, or you like or post, or whatever, and you're involved in this, you actually risk falling into believing that people with ideas you don't agree with are bad people. They're not people with bad ideas. You start believing they're actually bad people. You see, the bad people are not the ones with bad ideas. The bad people are the ones doing the character attacks. Racists, Nazis, threats to democracy. Those are the bad people. They're the problem. Separate yourself from them. Do something better. If what you're watching or listening to or see on your phone or computer, and you have a lot of that, really analyze your life. You know, we're a combination of the books we read or what we read and the people we hang out with, who we associate with. Human beings are very social creatures. I stated this earlier. I'll say it again. The attackers, people who attack the character of somebody instead of their ideas because they disagree with them, need to be rejected and not taken seriously, laughed at, ridiculed, ostracized, and removed from positions of power or influence. And this is what you need to realize. Evil only succeeds when good people do nothing. Be one of the good people. That's what Charlie Kirk would have wanted. Abraham Lincoln stated it this way at a time our country had deep divisions. He said, we need to appeal to our better angels. That's what we need to do. Stay tuned in the last segment. I got a few more thoughts. Some of our constitutional rights and how they're at threat and how this whole situation could turn for the better or the worse and why it's so important.
Stay tuned for more common sense from Ference. For more information, contact Ference at 866-268-4422 or yourpersonalbank.com. That's 866-268-4422. Welcome back to the Your Personal Bank Show with Ference Toth. Want more information? Contact Ference at 866-268-4422 or yourpersonalbank.com. That's 866-268-4422. Now back to the show with Ference Toth.
Welcome back to the Your Personal Bank Show. This is Ference. If you want to reach me, you can do so at yourpersonalbank.com. Yes, you will reach me. It's yourpersonalbank.com. If you missed some of the early parts of the show, I'm going to encourage you to go to the Your Personal Bank website or the Your Personal Bank app and listen to some of the thoughts I shared about the direction I believe our country is going or could go after the assassination of Charlie Kirk. This is a really big deal, folks. I believe this with all of my heart, and my heart is broken for his family. I've prayed for his wife and his kids and all those who loved him, and I ask that you would too. What's so heartbreaking about this is not only that he was a husband and a father of young children, but he was doing one of the most quintessential American things that a person can do. He was debating in the arena of ideas when he got shot and assassinated. You see, we have the right to disagree in this country. Part of the reason I served in the military was because I believed in that, and I wanted to support that. It's a remarkable gift that our founders gave us that most countries, not only now, but ever in the history of the world, has ever had. And you know, freedom of speech is the First Amendment, and it's the First Amendment for a reason. The reason is freedom of speech is the most important freedom we have. Without it, our society disintegrates. When people stop talking, they either separate completely, or as Charlie Kirk often said, they resort to violence. He didn't want our country going into a civil war. It has happened before. You realized when the South stopped engaging in conversation, in debate, take the Southern senators and congresspeople, and they resigned and went south and stopped talking, what happened next? That's when the shooting started. You see, you can discuss and debate and argue with someone you disagree with. You can even become passionate and even heated sometimes. That's okay. You can always disagree with someone's ideas without attacking their character. If you attack someone's character, you resort to that because you're losing the argument. It's intellectually immature. You're no different than a grade school kid making fun of somebody else, and you're just trying to be a bully. And you know, you don't think you're right or better than someone else just because maybe you have a degree they don't have, or more money than they have, or any other reason for that matter. Some of the most astute people I have ever met in my life appear very humble on the surface. If you get to know them, you find out they're far deeper than you might have realized. See, what you have to do is test your ideas with people that not only agree with you, but those that don't. This will sharpen your thoughts. Iron sharpens iron. You will become more solid in your ideas and more persuasive over time. So if you firmly believe in your idea, test it, challenge it, do the research, build the evidence, make the case, do what a lawyer, consider you're in court and you're defending your idea in court. Would you win that battle? Would you persuade a jury? If you don't test those ideas, what you believe in, you're just following somebody else's ideas and you're nothing more than a pawn. You see, you need to realize there's many people out there that have agendas and want you to think of a certain way so they can benefit. Propaganda works. Joseph Goebbels was famous for stating that a lie repeated often enough will become truth for some people. There's some examples that are easy if you just use a little bit of reason, logic, and some common sense. And once you understand their agenda, it's easy to determine their motivations. Legacy media is a great example of wanting you to watch and listen more so they can sell more advertising. Many of them have realized that if you feed a narrative they think you want to hear, you'll tune in more, you'll listen more, you'll watch more. More listeners equals more advertising. More advertising equals more dollars. They don't even have to believe in it themselves personally. They just want to make more money. The View is a show that comes to mind that is a perfect example of this. You can't convince me that those ladies on The View believe every crazy idea they put out there. They do it for attention. More attention means more money. Now, people who think the government is the solution typically want to benefit from the government. Politicians in particular, want to be elected and reelected. Why? They want more power. More power equals more money. Nancy Pelosi is a great example of this. If she said, I want to be in Congress so I can benefit from insider trading, it wouldn't be ethical, but it would be honest. Now, she's not the only one. There's a number of them on both sides, both parties, who are benefiting personally from all of this, from stock trading, from insider information. Unfortunately, we have too many of them. Do you realize there are funds that follow Nancy Pelosi's trades and have outperformed the S&P 500 over the last several years? And the fact that people re-elect her every 2 years, they need to get their head examined. What are we doing as citizens, voting in these kind of obvious compromised people that are just, frankly, there to benefit themselves, not to represent us? If we could wake up and educate ourselves more and realize maybe we could replace those people. And again, I'm talking about both sides of the aisle, both parties. You know, business leaders who support more government are typically receiving some kind of government contract or legislation that benefits their business. Think military-industrial complex is a great example. Or cheap labor, open borders for more cheap labor. Individuals who support more government are often benefiting personally, whether it's a government job, some kind of government benefits, housing, food, whatever. They want to see the gravy train continue. That's the reason. Fewer people on the government dole would mean fewer people would vote for that. That would actually be good for our economy and our smaller government. By the way, if you're for more government and your argument was you wanted bigger government so you could benefit, you would actually win the debate. Couldn't argue with that. It would be honest. It would be intellectually honest. Now, I agree it wouldn't be ethical, but at least I could respect your honesty. And this is why I've always had less of an issue with Bernie Sanders than most politicians. I disagree with Bernie Sanders on nearly everything he stands for, but he does openly admit he prefers socialism. That's honest. But where he's not honest is how he benefits from attacking capitalism while benefiting from it in the form of multiple houses, private jets, etc. So Bernie himself is not really telling the whole story. I think the last thought I want to discuss is about guns and the Second Amendment. Now, I know this is highly personal and for a lot of people, but I think it's important because this is how Charlie Kirk was assassinated. Although it will upset some, I'm going to share this in Charlie Kirk's honor because I think that's what he would have wanted, because that's what he did. See, Charlie Kirk was not killed because of gun laws. He was killed for his ideas. He was a threat to people who want more power and control. Leaders who want to restrict guns know an unarmed society is easier to control. Look at England, perfect example. There are people in jail today for posting messages that the current leaders don't like. That is tyranny. And the citizens do not have a way to defend themselves. Individuals who promote restrictions on guns typically are afraid of guns. They're unfamiliar or they're ignorant about guns, and it comes out in their arguments. It's so obvious to anyone who has had any experience with guns. Most of these gun restriction advocates have no clue when they talk about ARs and automatic. They have no clue about anything. It's laughable. It's a common joke in the gun community. You see, if you have a problem with guns, I recommend taking a gun safety course. Get familiar with it. Understand it better. You don't necessarily have to own one, but at least understand the other side of the argument. How are you going to win an argument? You have to understand the other side. Go to a gun range. Meet some gun owners. Ask them questions with a genuine desire to learn. Ask them why gun ownership is important to them. You see, if you don't know, you're ignorant. And when you argue for gun restrictions, your ignorance shows. You're not going to persuade anyone who has any basic understanding. Now, if you do this, I predict you're going to find most gun owners are thoughtful, intelligent, and decent people. Statistics show that legal gun owners are responsible for the fewest gun-related crimes of all categories, no matter how you measure it. Remember, the Second Amendment is here to protect the First Amendment. It gives the right for a citizen to protect themselves from harm, from either a criminal or an overzealous government. That was the intention of the founders. By the way, the Second Amendment is the only right given in the Constitution that states it shall not be infringed. That's as strong a legal language as you can get. So those that fight for gun rights or gun restrictions, I should say, frankly, don't understand. They're ignorant and they're barking up the wrong tree. And if you think they have a good argument or it sounds, what they're saying kind of sounds sort of good, do a little research. Understand it fully. Understand why the founders put the Second Amendment in the Constitution. Look at countries that don't have those protections and the rights that they've lost. And get to know some gun owners. Get familiar. At least have some basic knowledge. I've had discussions with this with people who were very adamant against them, who took some of those steps and now are far more favorable. In fact, some of them are gun owners themselves today because they were open-minded enough to realize and humble enough to realize they didn't know everything. And maybe what they were getting told or fed wasn't the entire truth, that there was an agenda, and they were falling for it. And they did their own research, and they asked their own questions, and came to their own conclusions. And that's what being an adult and a responsible citizen is all about. That is my hope for this country, this turning point, no pun intended, that I hope God turns Charlie Kirk's assassination, this waste of a human life, the devastation on his family and those that loved him, that God turns this into something good. That is my hope, and that's my prayer. If you want to contact me on how to navigate and survive this chaotic situation that we're in, and God forbid, maybe become worse, I don't know. I hope not. But if it does, you want to protect yourself, protect the downside, eliminate risk, eliminate taxes, create more liquidity, whatever it may be, Contact me at yourpersonalbank.com. Stay tuned next week for some more great information. And as long as it's on our money, in God we trust.
Listen Tuesdays at noon and Saturdays at 1 to the Your Personal Bank Show for more information. Contact Ference at 866-268-4422 or yourpersonalbank.com. That's 866-268-4422. This show is designed to provide accurate and authoritative information. The presenter and guests of this program do not engage in legal, accounting, or tax advice. Professional advice regarding your situation should be sought if required. Some products discussed may have limitations and not be available in all states. Excessive unpaid loans may affect performance. Distributions may become taxable if not managed properly. Replacements may not be suitable for everyone. There may be charges when replacing coverage. Dividend rates and bank line of credit rates may change. For current rates, contact Ference at 866-268-4422 or yourpersonalbank.com. Again, that's 866-268-4422 or yourpersonalbank.com.